Hi, it's me, Chris Harder, and welcome back to Showboys, the podcast bringing you a glittery, gritty, full frontal glimpse into the world of boylesque. What is boylesque? We're going to find out. You know, there's a couple of sayings about how performers should approach their audiences. One school of thought is that the audience gets the show that they get, meaning if the audience is rude or obnoxious, or even if the performer has had a bad day, that is the kind of show that's going to happen, no apologies. Other people say it is the performer's job to show the audiences what kind of performance they're going to get, which I kind of take to mean that the performer should give 110% no matter what the audience is giving back. Personally, I don't know if I side completely with one opinion or the other. I'm kind of a big proponent of this thing called context, but I do know that there is a certain type of performer who genuinely shines no matter how dark or dour the audience's attitude, and who grows where they are planted no matter how small the stage or the minds of the people they are presented to. And that is certainly the case of my guest today. This person is a burlesque performer, a producer, a creative, an innovative Adonis, a masquerade mystery, an effervescent ecological stripper spokesperson whose work continually transcends the strip and the tease. Sometimes he gives you libidinous latex. Other times he serves up stories layered with satire and political critique. But no matter who he is on stage, you better believe he is always locked, loaded, and fully lash to the 110th percent degree. He has toured across the US, including his home state of Alaska, as well as extensively throughout Europe and Australia. And he is also a co-founder of the world-renowned multidisciplinary burlesque collective Mod Carousel. Please welcome to the Showboys stage, the Luminous Pariah.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you, Chris. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. I always say this, but I love writing the intros. I always have kind of like a moment of panic where I'm like, what am I going to say about this person? Or how can I not even what can I say, but how am I going to fit in everything that I want to say about them? Especially if it's someone that I've known for a long time, such as you. So yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yay. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
I feel really good. I'm just kind of adjusting from leaving day job world into my relaxation time. So this is the perfect time to have a little chat with you.
Great. How do you unwind from a day job? Because I also have kind of started more of a dayish job, and the brain drain I feel is actually like so much more from burlesque. What do you do?
I agree. So my brain drain is definitely real, but I have the opposite. I'm stuck in a chair all day, and I love my job. I'm right now I'm a user experience designer. I love it. I'm solving problems all day, but I cannot fidget enough, and I don't have a standing desk currently. So, I might get up in the middle of the day and do like a little bit of yoga or something, but by the end of the day I'm just itching to move. So typically, screen goes off and I start a workout, and I'll have, between 30 minutes or an hour, and just really get my blood going. And that helps me actually wind down because I feel like a complete person rather than a little robot.
Wow, that is so much more productive. I've just been smoking weed.
I mean, that works too. I tend to become extremely anxious. So, I abstain.
Well, you know what? I actually don't know how to transition out of that, but I do know that I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been following you from afar and so happy for you and your recent grad school success and this next step. But I want to talk to you about boylesque or burlesque or whatever we're calling it these days. I wanted to start with your name because I would say I am a smart person, but I'm not always the most observant. And even though I know what pariah means by definition, it only recently kind of dawned on me that you are calling yourself a luminous social outcast. And I was just wondering, where did the inspiration for your name come from? And how do you see yourself as a pariah if you still do?
If I still do, thank you for the end to that. I chose the name Pariah because I've never ever felt like I fully fit into a single group of individuals, of
Mhm.
people. And upon discovering burlesque, I had not taken any burlesque classes yet. I had a big theater background, a big dance background, and I was really into the idea of it. But my first burlesque experience in terms of community was actually the very first BurlyCon. So this was November of 2008, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to choose a name so that I can introduce myself to the other performers, right? So I chose the name Pariah because it felt very fitting. It wasn't taken by another burlesque performer yet. It was descriptive in the sense that I don't feel like I fit in anywhere. So I went to BurlyCon, and one of the first people I introduced myself to was Tigger, our beloved Tigger. And he said right there, then and there, he said, Pariah, that doesn't seem like that really suits you. Have you thought of either changing your name or adding something to it to make it more, you? Your immediate personality is effervescent, and it's bright and it's smiley and it's approachable. So I'm not really sure why you choose Pariah. So I went on this very long-winded explanation of why I chose Pariah, and that is also a great illustration of why maybe it's not always the best name. So I coupled luminous with it because there's this concept of maybe sometimes someone's outcast from specific communities, not necessarily because they have bad ideas. Maybe their ideas are even good ideas, and they can be an effervescent and bright person at the same time as being outcast from certain communities. So a little bit of an oxymoron, which I've always loved from my very first Hotmail address, Frosty Blaze, uh,
Oh my God.
all the way to adulthood, and that's the history of the Luminous Pariah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. I think that is maybe the first time I've talked to any performer who made like such a conscious choice in their name. A lot of times people are like, well, I had to do this one gig, so I called myself like Trixie Von Cheesecake. And if there is a Trixie Von Cheesecake out there, I'm not trying to personally shame you. But I think like, a lot of people looking back would be like, oh, I would change my name if I could go back. But I love that name because there are no other Luminuses or no other pariahs. Like we've got plenty of Trixies and Maxes and everything else. And you do immediately kind of brighten up a room, I think. Like just naturally. It just seems like a natural quality that you have.
I feel like most of the time I do. And when it comes to those names that are kind of classic in our community too, the Lolas, the kittens, the kitties,
Hmm.
those have their place. And I've been pondering that for a while. I think there's a certain standard. There's a certain idea of anonymity that can be a little bit fun, right? And then how do you make that slightly more anonymous character unique? Whereas I have always had this obsession with uniqueness from ever since I can remember. So I knew right away that I wanted a name that was just a little bit odd and stood out right away. So yeah, I guess that's partially where that came from too.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to ask. For those people who don't know what BurlyCon is, what can you explain it?
Yeah, I haven't been in a few years. BurlyCon, Burly and Con, it's a burlesque convention. And it's the only burlesque convention that I know of in the United States, at least, that is centered around education and learning. So it's not a place where we go and perform and compete for prizes or, try to impress one another. We go and we network and we meet people from all over the world. There is some workshopping. You can, throw up a new number for people to give you feedback on, but it's not centered around performing. It's just centered around learning and teaching and meeting other people. It's really fantastic. There's all kinds of classes. Yeah, so that's what BurlyCon was. It was a great first experience because I had no idea how vast the burlesque community was, and it just keeps getting bigger by the day.
Yeah, I've never actually been, and I was asked to teach last year, and I really couldn't make it work. And I have you taught there as well?
I haven't. I've proposed a few classes, but I think what happens is when I put together a curriculum, it's a little bit scattered. And then if I don't have time to refine it, but it's time to, put in an application, I'll just end up putting in a scattered curriculum. And I think they read it and they're like, okay, we know you're good at this and we know you have excellent ideas, but if you could just kind of refine it a little bit better. So I have not taught at BurlyCon yet, but maybe as I perform a little bit less, maybe more teaching is in my future.
Definitely, definitely. I think you'd be an excellent teacher. Earlier, before I hit record, you were like, "Do you want to ask questions about me?" And I was like, "No, because I am going to talk about myself a lot." And I always panic teaching too, though, because I feel like so many performers I know, especially you, have so much to share. But sometimes, like actually condensing the kind of knowledge that you learn on stage, especially in nightlife, into a class is almost kind of counterintuitive because so much of it, especially for burlesque as a solo performance form, is like it's self-taught, it's self-learned, and it's specific to you, your body, and your relation to the audience, right?
Fully agree. And then, there's what you learn by observing other performers backstage in your local community, and then there's what you pick up by traveling around the country and then traveling abroad, performing in more artistic shows or performing in more entertainment based shows like nightclubs, dinner theaters, things like that. So yeah, how do you kind of take all of that and put it in bullet point format and apply it to a single subject matter? I did teach a class in Reykjavik one time that went really well, and I had so much fun. And everyone else had a great time as well. But it did feel a little bit like a shame to say, okay, here is a burlesque class. Well, what is it about? It is about burlesque. That was requested by the folks that brought me in. I do teach a makeup class, and that one seems to be a little bit easier on the brain because it's about a very specific subject, and I've kind of honed it to 90 minutes. Can breeze through it in an hour if I need to, but 90-minute stage makeup class.
Oh, I would love to take that with you. I really want Pinot Noir to teach like how to do a backflip in 3 easy steps.
3 easy steps, please. Yes. Yes. Acrobatics for muggles.
Yes. Oh my God, please. Well, so back to your name. I was thinking about the time that you visited New York City. You stayed with me, and I think I booked you at this show called Testosterone.
Yes.
Testosterone, which I was talking about with Mr. Gorgeous lately. I feel like I personally have had so many, like, very positive and also sometimes very negative experiences performing for crowds of gay men, which sometimes talking to people who are not queer, they're like, oh, I would just think that, all queer people get along or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I was just curious, what has your experience been like beyond that show, like for queer audiences? And also, what's your just ideal show setup?
Ooh, those are some great questions. Let's take it back to that specific experience with testosterone. And I think I did the show at least 2 times, maybe
Yeah.
three. But I remember the first time very vividly because Bianca Del Rio was hosting. And I remember listening to her. So we were changing downstairs, right? And I remember hearing her through the stairwell and thinking that drag queen has such an intense and abrasive sense of humor, and the audience seemed to love it, but I only heard bits and pieces, and I was a little bit not sure how to feel about it. And then she went on, Drag Race, and showed the world who she is as a performer. So that was kind of the setup. And I remember going up the stairs and entering into the audience, and it was kind of this ocean of gay men, and it didn't feel like a very mixed crowd. Some places it's mixed demographic in terms of age, in terms of sexuality. This didn't necessarily feel like that, at least not my memory of it now. And this was probably like 2012. It was a while ago. And my persona, for people who haven't seen imagery of me, I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't call myself a drag performer. I do wear a lot of makeup, big eyelashes, glamorous lipstick. Sometimes I'll wear these gigantic high heels, and I love that. Lots of rhinestones, high glamour. But I'm definitely not wearing, boobs and hip pads and long wigs. I'm not lip syncing to pop songs. I'm not really doing a traditional version of drag. It's more of kind of like this gender exploration.
Hmm.
And so I think that confuses some people when they're expecting to see maybe a drag performer or a go-go boy, right? Like some sort of kind of what's the word I'm looking for? This binary. Either you are hyper feminine or ultra masculine,
Yes.
but that in between sometimes I think causes confusion. And that was one of those crowds where they were sort of unimpressed by
Hmm.
this blend that I had to give them. Since then, though, it really depends on the place that I go, and I've had wonderful reception, all over, and then I've also had awkward reception all over. I think it depends on the nightclub or the stage, how it's promoted. I think you do a wonderful job at promoting and producing your shows, but of course, it's up to the demographic that regularly attends the venue as well to decide decide what they're going to show up with that night.
Yeah, 100% everything you said. And I will say, I think it's the host job always to try to set the audience up for the performer as best they can. And I will say, Bianca has always been so nice backstage, even though she does have like a truck driver dumpster mouth on stage. And I guess like the redeeming thing there is that when she does attack, she always attacks the audience and she doesn't attack performers. So I guess that's the silver lining. For
Yes, for sure. The since this is audio, you can't see me nodding. Yes, Bianca is wonderful. My personal experience interfacing with her was
Mhm.
fantastic. But it was, yes, that sort of setup with the crowd was kind of like, we're doing tension now, right? Like that's
Yes.
the vibe.
Tension, honey. You've gotten to tour around the world and experience all kinds of spaces. What though is your ideal show setup?
Yeah, I actually really love a surprise show. And I'm not saying like a guerrilla theater, which is fun, or a pop-up performance. I'm saying I love an audience that doesn't really know what to expect because they're always pleasantly surprised and they're so happy. And I love that. I feel like watching a child watch Sesame Street for the first time when they see a Muppet on screen. They just light up. And I love seeing that kind of childlike glow come from the audience. I think of one of my favorite surprise audiences was the venue was a circus tent in Reykjavik, Iceland. And it was, these folks are expecting to see some acrobats and some juggling, and there are clowns and there's physical theater, but they see me on the poster. They don't really have a container or context for what that might mean. And then I get to be the ones to introduce them to that. Yeah, I love audiences like that. Big burlesque festivals can be fun as well, but I tend to think that sometimes the crowd is a little bit inundated with burlesque and it's like this recipe. And rather than what is your performance that you're about to deliver, it's more of how are you going to do this differently than the person before you and after you.
How do you feel about performing for crowds that are mostly other performers? Because personally, like at Burlesque Hall of Fame, people are like, oh, it's filled with people who love you. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. And also, like, I don't necessarily like performing for the performance because I feel like as any kind of artist, you're always like watching it slightly from a detached, critiquing point of view, or at least I am.
Yeah, once you know how the sausage is made, you can't not know, and you can't stop thinking about it. And that's kind of how I feel performing for other performers. I actually get a lot more nervous. I'm nervous for smaller audiences rather than larger ones, and I'm nervous for, peers rather than people I don't know. And that's because I know they see if something goes a little bit wrong, they know exactly what's going on. There's no hiding it. Whereas a normal crowd maybe won't pick up on a costume malfunction or a little bit of choreography that was a little bit offbeat, but our peers do. And they're gracious most of the time, but we also want to impress one another and raise the bar for each other, right? So, yeah, I'm with you there. I feel a little bit nervous.
And also, I can't ever stop thinking about sausage. All the sausages, always on my mind. You started to talk about your aesthetic and your presentation on stage. What are some of the influences that I guess inspire you as the Luminous Pariah that you pull into your burlesque?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Southeast Alaska, and that gave me sort of this appreciation and love for nature. And it was also a very artistic community, and so that gave me an appreciation for the arts and creativity and what we could do as humans. And then, as when I discovered burlesque, it was sort of like, okay, how can I fuse? Are these ideas that can even be fused together? We can be creative, but is it possible to do this in an ecological sort of a way? So when I
Mm.
first set out, my concept was, okay, I'm going to create every costume out of fully recycled materials. I would go to the thrift store, see what I could find, and cut it up and try to sew it back together. It was an absolute nightmare. I
Yeah.
did make a few costumes, but you know how hard that is to upcycle things. The people who upcycle do not get enough praise. It is very difficult. It is super time consuming. And I just didn't have the skill set for that. So, once I graduated to hiring a costumer or asking, my sweetheart to make something who's a professional costumer for me, then that was great. And then I could have things that actually fit the way they should. they were made out of the materials that they needed to be made out of, and that way they also lasted longer. So there's that sort of concept of, my ecological and nature fascination upbringing, but it also influenced my narrative. I'm narrative obsessed as a performer as well,
Mhm.
and that comes from the theater background. I want to take the audience on a 3.5 minute adventure or tell them a four minute story, and sometimes that is about my hate for Monsanto, or maybe it's an homage to being from New York might know Amanda Lepore or have even
Yes.
performed with her a
Oh,
number of times.
yes.
So she has a song called My Hair Looks Fierce, which I love,
Mhm.
an old favorite. And this is kind of my homage to the North Pacific Gyre, which is a swirling, island of floating island of garbage in the Pacific, twice the size of the state of Texas. So it's for me, it's always been this creative puzzle of, can I still do something entertaining that can work for a nightlife crowd, but also that has kind of this layer or undertone of a narrative that might be a little bit more interesting for, theatrical crowds. So that's where I get my inspiration.
Wow. Okay, a couple of things. I did not know that there is like literally like a state size pile of trash.
Yes, it's twice the size of Texas. At least the last time I checked, it's probably bigger. And it's because of the way the ocean currents work. The plastic kind of gets ground up in the ocean, and then it sort of floats and gets kind of pushed, and it swirls in this one area. And they've studied it. They're trying to figure out, if humans can actually ever clean this up. But as it swirls, it grinds itself together and it becomes smaller and smaller. And those microplastics make their way into the food chain, and eventually humans end up kind of consuming that through fish, or Arctic folks, Inuit folks consuming whales that consume fish. So it's sort of like this big karma.
And so this relates to Amanda Lepore's "My Hair Looks Fierce." What's the connection there?
I love that. So the concept here, the connection that I made anyways, was this sort of, the lyrics are kind of Barbie-esque, right?
Mhm.
The chorus is, I don't know much about clothes, but my hair looks fierce. So we're serving vapidness with these lyrics, and I love that. So what I was kind of poking fun at is, as humans, we sometimes get over consumed with capitalism and consumption, and in the end, we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. So it's fun to celebrate momentarily, and be materialistic at times, as long as we remember the outcome.
Two things. I love Amanda Lepore. She is one of the nicest people in nightlife. And also, that's probably the most elevated number that is done to that song, which I think, we just have to put on the record. I also think, though, that's just a great example because I was talking to Lou Henry Hoover about the influences in their work. And also, besides this balance between the strip and the tease, what other kind of themes they feel like they're balancing. And they talked about balancing comedy and tragedy. And I feel like a big part of your work, and please feel free to correct me, is not only balancing the strip and the tease, but this balance between, like you were saying, consumerism or just kind of the ornateness and beauty and frivolity of burlesque with the very real serious conditions that we all live under, but kind of just choose to ignore or pass off or, leave for the next generation to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. Well put. And that's how I feel too when I am performing or creating a number. It's okay, here's maybe a little more of an intense message, but can we do it in sort of a funny way?
Yeah.
So I think that comedy and, short performances are a little bit easier when it comes to conveying difficult messages. And not to say that every time I'm on stage I have something heavy to say. That's definitely not who I am. But yes, I like to couple those things together. I think that they go very well together.
You've been called the Bjork of Burlesque. Do you agree? And also, do you like Bjork?
Oh my God. Okay. So that is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I love, love, love Bjork. I was raised by a very hippie lesbian who loved to listen to, folk singer, kind of folk singer with a guitar music. So that's what I knew as music growing up. And the first time I heard Bjork, I was 18 years old. I lost my mind because I had never seen and heard an artist be so unapologetically themselves and so kind of bizarre and explorative with their genre and multi genre, right? We're talking
Mm-hmm.
film, fashion, visuals, and music. And what is music, right? She's questioning this art form that she's participating in, and that has always inspired me. And I fell in love with Bjork before I started performing. Used Bjork for a couple of acts that I've made. Yeah, does that kind of
Oh yeah, no, it absolutely. My other question was going to be, if you didn't see yourself as Bjork of Burlesque, what would be the other musical artist?
Yes. Okay. So I love, love, love Bjork. But as I continued on my journey as a human and growing to love different musicians, if I were to choose one musician to identify with as a burlesque performer, it would undoubtedly be Grace Jones, who I got
Oh,
to see on tour in Seattle a few months ago. Absolutely amazing. I love that she blends, fashion and video, image manipulation and photography and performance art all into one person. And she doesn't apologize to anyone for it. And I really, really, really admire that.
you are like the love child of Bjork and Grace Jones. It totally makes sense. Also, what music was playing in your mom's home then? Was it like a lot of Melissa Etheridge, or what's going on?
Yeah, Melissa Etheridge, Indigo Girls, Tracy Chapman, even John Denver.
My mom played a lot of Sheryl Crow, the first album, where she's a little bit more acoustic. Like, "Are you strong enough to be my man?" Like, those lyrics are burned into my memory because it was played a lot.
Do you feel like that influenced the music that you either like or don't like?
Yes, because I mean, I love all kinds of music, but if you give me like a soulful, smart female on a guitar, I will goon out to it for hours. I'll cry. I'll go through like whole waves of yeah. So Sheryl Crow, if you're listening, just know I'm crying to you probably every other morning of the week. And good tears. You studied theater at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle. Originally, I know. What kind of shows did you imagine yourself performing in?
When I was studying theater, my goal was to graduate and instantly become a famous actor. There was no room for being a regular person. I wanted to be a celebrity. Um, so my goal was to move to New York and wait tables and try to make it on Broadway, or musical theater, or move to LA and wait tables and try to make it into film and television. But I ended up taking a year off because Cornish is a very expensive private school. So my goal was to take 1 year off and then return and study. But in that year, I went home to Alaska and I was a whale watching tour guide. I did that for a while. So this was my second time doing it. And I was kind of having a little crisis because so many people were telling me that I was such an amazing teacher and asking me, where did I get my master's in, biology or ecology, marine biology? And it just sort of shed light on the subject that I really loved, which was ecology and marine biology. And so I decided to leave theater, have a funeral for it, and say, okay, what if I use those theatrical skills for something a little bit more benevolent, like being an ecological educator? So I moved back to Seattle and I started going to school for just getting my prerequisites out of the way. And I was working as a barista, like everyone does here, and taking a full course load, and I totally burnt out. So again, I said I'm going to take a little break, maybe a quarter, maybe 2 quarters, and then I'll come back full force into it. And then I will be a famous ecology teacher. So during that first quarter I took off, I stumbled across my first burlesque show, and that initiated a 15-year career in burlesque.
Yes. Did you work at a Starbucks when you were a barista?
You know what? I applied to Starbucks 3 or 4 times and I never actually was accepted. I worked other places that were wonderful and I learned, I don't want to use the word better, but I learned more, how shall we put it, like artisanal, I guess is what I would say, in terms of how to actually make coffee in a humid environment.
Oh. Did you have a dream role originally? Like, I also went to school originally for acting, and I thought I was going to be in every Arthur Miller play, which I guess says a lot about my knowledge of theater at the time. But did you have like a dream role in a specific show or director or anything like that?
I didn't. And I think that when I started going to theater school, I realized just how much I didn't know about theater, if that makes sense. Not in a cheesy term, but even the classics, Raisin in the Sun. I knew Death of a Salesman. I didn't see myself as the father.
Yeah.
So I think that I also started to learn more about myself in school and learn maybe that I didn't feel like there were roles for me out there. And
Hmm.
I knew I really didn't want to be in Rent that bad. Like, sure, I can play Angel in Rent, but like, I want something more unique. Not that that is not unique, but I guess what I'm saying is I learned that I wanted to create my own stuff. I
Yes.
didn't want to act in someone else's production all the time.
Today for you, tomorrow for me, baby. You're probably the only queer former theater major I've heard say that they didn't want to be in Rent. I feel like every other person would be like, I will would cut off their arm to be Angel, and then sew a fake one back on. I always like to do a little bit of research on the people that I interview, and normally that involves Instagram stalking. But I found a couple of great articles on you. You are also just such a well-spoken person. I mean, if you haven't met Luminous Pariah yet and you're in the burlesque world, what are you doing with your life? Reach out, say hello, make a connection. You will not be disappointed. So I was looking at this interview and you were talking about the word boylesque and your own kind of personal approach and opinion to it. Can you say a little bit more? How do you define it, and what does it mean to you?
Interesting question because I don't remember how I answered that question the original time in that interview. So maybe my idea of what boylesque is and what that means to me has changed. I do know that the first time I heard the term, it was probably from Waxy Moon or Indigo Blue here in Seattle, and they promptly told me that Tigger was one of the original folks, our lovely Tigger, to use that word regularly, and or maybe even coined that term. And I liked it because, again, it was another thing that I could use to identify myself as different than the main, right? Like once I
Hmm.
was accepted into this large, wonderful burlesque community and I had this unique name, it was like, okay, how many other ways are there that I can, distinguish myself from this ocean of amazing, sparkly people?
Yeah.
So I chose to kind of identify with that. Also because my character identifies as male. I identify as male as a person, and I think that it works for marketing, or at least in the past, it was something that was helpful. Just kind of putting in a write up, like, hey, this is a little bit different than another thing. It's that age old question of why are you different than someone else?
Hmm.
Now I would probably still give you the same answer in terms of what boylesque means. It's a male identifying or male persona performer who is performing burlesque, and that's it. But I wouldn't necessarily want to call myself a boylesque performer. I feel like
Hmm.
that is limiting. I think maybe folks would expect something. I like the unexpected. So I would just go with the general term burlesque at this point for myself.
Yes, absolutely. I was curious, and you talked about this earlier too, because when I think of your numbers, I not only think of like a high concept and a story, but I think of just like the glamour of the makeup, the lashes. And I was curious, do you feel like you are specifically burlesquing or subverting like a female or a male gender role, or is that even an objective for you when you're like creating acts?
It's an objective for myself as an artist.
Hmm.
And then that my persona, the Luminous Pariah, is an exploration of gender and things that are fantastical and ethereal. And it's like the political form of the word queer. I feel like a very queer person, and I want my persona to be queer. So it does show up in everything that I do. Not necessarily is it the punchline or the point of every act that I do. For instance, there's one where I'm a literal Muppet. And the
Hmm.
fact that I am wearing eyelashes under this mask that I pull off, but that is not the point of the number. The point of the number is that I'm a Muppet. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. Absolutely. No, I think about that because I always describe like my own aesthetic as, Or, and I guess it's kind of changed too. Originally, I used to think of it as like a cross between the Village People and Tom of Finland. So, like,
Ooh, that's a great way to describe you.
oh, thank you. You know, like kind
Yeah.
of like seemingly butch, but then flipping it so that there's like more flamboyance. And like you were saying, when we hear the word male burlesque performer or like boylesque performer, what we think we're going to get. Just like what all those audiences at Testosterone thought they were going to get before we came out on stage.
Surprise.
Right? Thanks, Bianca. So I have to ask the lashes. What are your tried and true tips for applying lashes? What's your mascara? And you have such a unique way of wearing them where you have these stacked top lashes and then you wear the bottom lashes kind of like around your cheekbones about, would you say?
Yeah.
How did that all come about?
Ooh, so the first time I performed burlesque on stage, let me back up even further. The first time I ever wore eyeliner was for a ballet production when I was 9 years old, and I remember this kind of moment of, I don't know, artistic euphoria, I guess, by applying the eyeliner or having another older dancer do it for me. And I looked in the mirror and saw these big winged kind of smoky eyes, and it just felt like me, like, ooh, there I am, I love it. And it felt very sexy. Not that a 9-year-old,
Sure.
should be, but what I'm saying is, like, it felt good, it felt very good. And when it came time to apply more makeup as an adult, especially in this scenario, it was like, okay, so I remember that I like this kind of playing with the eye, and I love this wing, how can I take it further? So my first version of the Luminous Pariah's face was the same length of wing that goes halfway to my sideburns, almost all the way across the side of my face. But because those two lines were so close to each other, from a distance, it looked like I was squinting because there wasn't enough space between them to really showcase that I had, eyes, or you could see my eyes. So I started taking notes from Cirque du Soleil's makeup and other performance groups that are meant to be viewed from very far away by the naked eye. And that's what they do as well. They usually include some white near their eye, and they also make the eyeliner on the lower lid further away than their actual lash line. So I thought, okay, that is a great idea. I want to play with that. And this is about around the time when Jackie Beat's documentary came out. And I can't remember the name of it, but I just remember the cover is this graphic of her iris and her pupil, her top lash and her bottom lash, but there are no lines connecting the two.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what gave me this idea of, ooh, maybe the lines don't have to connect. Maybe my bottom lash can just sort of float, on my cheekbone. And that has been how it's been this entire time.
Oh my god, I love that. I'm gonna tag Jackie Beat in this. Have you ever gotten to work with her?
No, not yet.
She's incredible. I mean, so salty, but funny, and like such a true old school New York performer. She used to draw her eyebrows on with Sharpies.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's,
I would love to meet her.
she's pretty incredible. So, with applying these lashes, then, and I will say, I just did the drag march with my boyfriend and a group of friends, and it was so fun. I went as Aunt Carrie Ann, everybody's fun Midwestern aunt. But putting on the eyelashes, I forgot how hard it is. What's your tip for putting on eyelashes?
There's intention behind it too. Like, why are you wearing these lashes? We mentioned, me being an ecological person, especially when I first started. It was like, how can I be a low imprint performer? So I rode a bicycle everywhere. And if you wear eyelashes the size of mine and you're trying to ride a bicycle flying down a hill in Seattle, you really have to have them glued on very well. So the method that I have adopted is to take duo lash glue or another uh, uh, latex-based lash glue, and I take the end of my paintbrush, not the brush end, but the handle end, and I'll dip it in the lash glue. I draw a line of glue on the lash itself, and then I draw a line of glue on my actual lash on my body, or, right on the skin
Hmm.
above the lash. And then I let them both get tacky, kind of like contact cement. And I stick them both together right before they're dry, and then they'll stick for a while. So I do the same method with the bottom, and
I
it works really well.
Yeah, I I love. I have this image of you, full face, bike helmet, like cruising down a hill in Seattle.
I remember looking down, to check what's going on with the gears, but then the lashes flip forwards and they close my eyes. So I have to flip my head back up and the lashes go back up.
Well, to answer your question, the reason why I wanted to wear lashes was to be hot. I just wanted to look hot. So,
Yeah, it works, doesn't it?
and what's your favorite mascara then? Because I'm in the market, baby.
I don't wear mascara.
Oh,
Isn't that wild? My lashes are just so big as a performer that I don't wear mascara because they're completely in shadow. My natural lashes are completely in shadow. Plus they're black anyway, so
okay. Well, that makes sense. Save a little money. Absolutely. I know we were talking about this earlier. I just came from one of my day gigs, which happens to be teaching, and my brain, when I tell you when I was just freelancing, I could do so many things in a day and then go perform. And now if I have to teach a class and then go perform or host, my brain is mush. Like running out of my ears. I can't form words like I am right now for this interview.
wild. You're pouring everything that you have in your brain into that one teaching session. So those students should be really grateful and I'm sure they're learning a lot, but I understand where you're saying it can be difficult to wrangle those words at the end of one of those days.
Yeah, emphasis on should be grateful. If I have any students listening to this podcast right now, you better start doing your fucking homework because I'm tired. I'm tired. But what I want to talk to you about is this incredible burlesque collective that you're a part of called Mod Carousel, which I've had the pleasure of getting to watch many times. And the group includes you, Paris Original, Trojan Original, and Moscato Sky, all exemplary performers in the greater burlesque community. And Moscato Sky also just won Princess of Burlesque at the Burlesque Hall of Fame. How did this group begin? And I'm curious because you're all such strong performers. How do you navigate the process of creating acts together?
Mod Carousel has been such a joy in my life and such an engine, and also a source of strife at times. It's been a wonderful thing to have. The group was brought together when I performed solo in my hometown for the very first time. This was 2009, and I was received so well, just overwhelmingly loved. And I came home, and Paris and I are together. We have been together for 15 years at this point, almost 15 years. And he is, I say, a recovering ballerina because the ballet world is wild, and what they tell men they can and cannot do is interesting, and I understand it's a classical art form and you have certain roles that you need to fill. But for Paris, there wasn't really a role that really felt good. So when I had discovered burlesque and sort of, shown that to him, he was just sort of like, oh, I want to do this too. I love this. This is amazing. It has so much freedom. I can be whoever I want. So I came back from this trip to Alaska, having been so loved. And I said, hey, what if we bring a show up there? What if we collect a couple of other performers and we actually all go up together? So then Trojan got on board and we all played the three sisters, the three witches, in a burlesque Macbeth that we found on Craigslist. And we learned, hey, this is actually great. We worked really well together. We seemed to create pretty seamlessly together in an ensemble way. And we worked like that for years. We worked like that for, I don't know, maybe 7 years or more. And then we met Moscato. And I was not teaching, but I was on a panel in Moscato's burlesque class at Cornish, where I also went to school. And the professor said, hey, you need to keep your eye on this person because when they graduate, I think you should just kind of take them on into Mod Carousel. They're amazing. Moscato is a dance major. And I said, well, we're not really, I'm sure they're great, but we're not really accepting new performers. We're not really looking to add to the group. We don't really know how that would work with our dynamic. And then we saw Moscato and was sort of like, okay, wait, maybe we can take on an intern. And we had Moscato intern. They very clearly were super talented and just needed a little bit of guidance, but would, get their wings and take off in no time. And that's exactly what happened. Moscato has been the glue to our group on many occasions. They're just such a creative, amazing individual that really kind of adds this fourth perfect balance to this collective that is Mod Carousel. So when we create numbers together, or even full shows at this point, we'll create like 2 shows a year, or we used to before, in the before times, we have a yes and sort of theater approach where we're basically just all together in a room laughing about something. And then someone says, oh, wait, yes. And then they add something to it, and you keep going and we end up with these really ridiculous ideas that end up being a show concept. And, sometimes that takes a turn and we do have opposing ideas, but I do believe at the end of the day that we kind of end up in a place that ends up really wonderful. And then sometimes it comes to dividing choreography, like if someone's busy, then three of them do the choreography, or all four of us will take it and, one person will do one 8 count, another person will do another 8 count, and that kind of thing. So we have different ways of working, but at the end of the day, it's like a homogenous, bizarre, creative baby that four of us have made together.
Yes. So when Moscato was the intern, were they like what kind of intern things were they doing?
Well, we made them rhinestone all of our stuff
Oh my God.
because it seems like an appropriate thing to have an intern for the burlesque world do. Because what is a burlesque intern, right? What does that mean?
Well, exactly. That's why I'm like, what does that even look like?
So we're like, okay, well, I guess we should somehow impart knowledge piece by piece on this person at a reasonable pace. So they would attend our rehearsals for group numbers that we would create. We created some low pressure group numbers where they had supporting acts, and then we created a show together where it was basically a trio with some numbers that existed, and then we added in some low pressure, like I said, low pressure group numbers, and then Moscato had their own numbers in it, and obviously shined. So from that moment on, we just kind of kept giving them more and more things to not just make for us, but more and more things to do themselves. And they were just full of questions. So they pretty much ran themselves as an intern. It was just a learning opportunity of how do you do this? How do you make that? What kind of, how do you edit your music? How do you apply for things? How do you cold call producers? How do you, make a website? How do you promote yourself? All of these questions that don't really exist in a handbook. They knew they wanted to be a professional entertainer and entertaining artists, and just sort of took it upon themselves to ask those questions. So I probably actually learned more about our craft because we were being asked these questions than I, would have originally, if that makes
It
sense.
makes total sense. And it just made me think because I always think about this at burlesque shows, or actually when I go to drag shows and I perform, because at every drag show, there is anywhere from like 3 to 5 gays backstage, like doing everything for this one drag queen, for free, right? And maybe like a drink ticket. And I know that's not the same scenario here, but I know for myself when I first started in burlesque, I wish I had reached out to more people because everything that I learned, I usually learned through, I mean, honestly, sometimes just failing and then like learning how to do it like a better way. And so, like, what a gift. I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is I feel like there should be more burlesque interns. And I'm now accepting applications for showboys. So reach out to me.
I love that idea. And then maybe you can make like a curriculum that you can pass around, and it can be a community thing that we add on to.
Yes.
Yeah, that idea of learning from the community and kind of taking someone under your wing. I guess in the drag world, that's the equivalent of having a drag mother, right?
Yeah, I think so. I was actually talking to, do you know Xavier in Minneapolis? Dirty Boy Xavier, drag king
Yes, yeah.
producer.
Mhm.
Yeah, they were also talking about that too. They kind of come from more of like a drag family setup. But yeah, let's have adopt a burlesque performer day. Bring your burlesque performer to work day.
I love that.
So I wanted to come back to this because you mentioned performing in Alaska for the first time. And I remember going back to North Dakota to perform for the first time and how nervous I was, and just thinking about who I was when I was living there versus who I was then in New York City. What was that like for you, and what kind of scenarios were playing out in your head as you were prepping to go back and do your show?
I like that you specify what kind of scenarios were playing out in my head because they were definitely very different than what actually ended up happening. Juneau is a fairly liberal place. It might be the most liberal city in Alaska, but even still growing up, there's this undertone of, is it safe here for everyone and, everybody, or is it not? It does have a lot of conservative folks who make themselves known, and their discomfort with the queer community and other marginalized communities. So I was just a little bit unsure of how I would be received. That, as well as combined with the fact that I was performing in a belly dance collective. So I was performing burlesque as a male bodied performer as a surprise to a group of people who had come to a dive bar in Southeast Alaska to watch a group of pretty ladies, right? So I was very nervous and I was very aware of the scenario that I was going to be presented in. So I ended up using that kind of fear of, okay, I'm picturing a fisherman kind of turning from his usual place at the bar and looking like, what is this? Is this a man wearing 6-inch heels? And then a row, I was picturing the front row being coastguard people, and then the row behind them was Navy guys, and they're all rowdy. And then it's just crickets when I come out on stage, and somebody breaks a bottle, 30 seconds into my number. And then I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is sort of catastrophizing, right? Is that what we call that?
It either sounds like a catastrophe or the setup of like a really great porn that I want to watch and search for. Sorry, please keep going.
No, I love that. I'm going to write that down and use that later. So this is the scenario that's playing out in my head. And I contacted the group and was like, hey, do you really feel like it's safe? Do you really feel like it's a good idea? They're like, yes, yes, yes. It's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. So I had this mental block. I only had this one number of, the Amanda Lepore, My Hair Looks Fierce with the plastic garbage bag outfit and the credit card earrings and the giant 6-inch high heels. I wear taller high heels now, but I didn't know what second number I could bring up there that would either speak to the community or be honestly safe to do. So I kind of use that catastrophe scenario to be the fodder for this number where I'm a fisherman. So I come on stage to a classic burlesque song. It's a bump and grind song, and I'm wearing muddy Carhartt pants, and I've got the big rubber extra tough boots that everyone in Southeast Alaska wears, and I've got the pants tucked into them. I have a flannel shirt. It's nicely tailored, but it's still like a, plaid flannel shirt. Got the sleeves rolled up, and I have this silly look on my face, like it's my version of what I think masculinity looks like, which is like a, like a downturned mouth, kind of like a bulldog.
Yeah.
And I walk with a very wide gait, and I'm carrying a stuffed fish. And I carry this fish on stage, and I'm so nervous. And it was a very interactive show. And I'm like, okay, what's going to be the first cat call or the first heckle? And the first heckle was, that's not a salmon, that's a bass.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, yeah, you're right. Leave it to, first of all, yes. But second of all, okay, if that's the worst it's going to be, let me continue, right? So I continue with the number, and it's this bump and grind song where I'm fishing for my second fish. I catch the fish, which is, in fact, a salmon. I beat the fish to death, and I rip it open. These are stuffed fish, like little pillows.
No fish were
And I
actually
rip
harmed.
them both open. Sorry?
Sorry, I said no fish were actually harmed in this burlesque act.
No fish were harmed. And I rip them open, and out of their fake entrails come these 2 high heels. And you can guess where the act goes from there. I strip down, and the movement changes to be more effeminate and fun and a lot of hips. The crowd went wild. They absolutely loved me. They love that number. They really liked the credit card number as well. So it was just this moment of maybe, I was kind of not giving my hometown or these people the benefit of the doubt. And oftentimes people are way more open-minded than we think they're going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love hearing that. And I also love that was it a dude who was like, that's not a bass, it's a salmon?
I can't remember. And sometimes, when you've been drinking that much whiskey, everyone's voice sort of sounds the same. Not me as a performer, but like when you get that low grovel if you've been drinking whiskey.
True.
So who knows who said it.
True.
But that community has been, I feel like my number one fan in a lot of ways. But Mod Carousel, when we go back, or used to go back every summer, they would just pack the place. We just had to start adding shows and, filling the audience with these amazing individuals. So I appreciate them all the time.
Yes. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear that. I do think that's something that gets maybe not taken for granted, but that people just kind of assume the worst of like these Midwestern states, these more rural areas. And the fact is, it's like queer people exist there too. And also like people who are not queer, who want to see a great show, who are allies. And of course there can be lots of ugliness in those places too, but it's just a reminder to me, like when I go home, that not everybody is out to get me, and sometimes it says a lot more about me that's my first gut reaction, as opposed to trying to give people like a fair shake.
Yes. But also it's a good reminder that, sometimes there are people in those communities because they don't see a lot of folks like us sometimes
Hmm.
that truly need that, be it someone who just needs a little bit of exposure therapy, or someone who is maybe queer themselves or just needs some art and is there, and we see each other and appreciate each other.
Yes. Speaking of hot, hot fishermen and fabulous fish, the last time that we were actually in person together, we were in a little film called Rusalka by the fabulous director Wes Hurley, who's a Seattle-based director and an award-winning director as well. You want to tell the folks what Rusalka was all about?
Rusalka is the Russian slash original version of the story of the Little Mermaid. And it's not a very, the original is not a very happy story. I feel like I remember Wes telling me that every time she takes a step after she has legs, it feels like she's walking on shards of broken glass, right? So it's got every kind of step of the way is painful in this version of the story. And Wes's particular storytelling style, especially for this film, was kind of like almost like a 70s porn kind
Mhm.
of a feel. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it had, like, a very kind of Tom of Finland, feel to it, at least for, like, the styling of, the humans. I feel like you as the mermaid were, like, beautiful and, what am I trying to say? I guess, like, otherworldly,
That feels very natural for me, right? To
oh,
be in a place to be in a place like that, and then to be the otherworldly one. I loved that role. I did find it an experience, one of my first experiences in film, right? Where
mhm,
you've got a million people helping out behind the scenes, which is not always the same in burlesque or live theater, and B, maybe not wearing clothes and being in a whole room full of people who were clothed and I'm the only one naked, like fully naked, or being in a river at 6:30 in the morning, even though it was summer. It was a very cold glacial river, wearing that fin because I'm a mermaid, right? And so, so these little moments of like, this is a life experience that I'm adding to my belt, and I kind of love that. It was a very
yeah, I totally forgot about that shoot at the river, and I just wanna say, hopefully this doesn't come off as, like, objectifying you, but you are gorgeous and you have, like, a beautiful body, but, like, you also have 0% body fat, and I feel like I don't have that much body fat, but I just remember, I think both of us, like, freezing in this river for, like, several hours.
Yes. Yeah. It was a while because they had to get all the right shots, and you have had to be coming out of the river, right?
Yes.
Or I was pulling you out or something, or we were on the edge of the river together, and then we shot the rest of it in a pool, which was warmer, but both of us were still going underwater over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were a great fellow actor to work with. That was so much fun.
Oh, well, same. I don't think I realized just how cool it was going to be. And I don't think I had seen a lot of Wes's work. I mean, I knew it was going to be fun working with you, but I was so amazed at the final product. Like, and it was beautiful. It was very queer in that it took this, again, very like commercialized story, and I think brought the sense of like queer loneliness to it and like this kind of like search for yourself and for finding your people and but also like it doesn't have a happy ending, right? It's all coming back to me now. I feel like I
Yeah, it does not have a happy ending, but it's also, it's that thing of like, what will you do to fit in? Is it worth it? What is unique to you? Is that something that is celebrated? Can you find a place where that is celebrated? Yeah, an othered allegory for sure.
well, on that note of searching for new places, as we were talking, we both have explored more of a regular day gig now. How are you finding day gig life and what are you doing now?
Currently, I am a user experience designer and I really enjoy it. I love solving problems all day.
Mhm.
And I work for a larger company, which is different. I've never done that before. And it's, a slower pace there. I like that it's a very big divide between what I would do with my personal time and what I do for capitalism, right? Like it means that it's really easy for me to leave work at work and my home life's my home life. So when I get to that point where I'm ready to create new burlesque performances or new other art, or maybe I will fuse some art together, I think that'll be even easier. I also enjoy how having a day job sort of allows me to support myself in ways that I wasn't able to do as a performer. I tried for a long time, and the self-employment train just didn't quite work for me. I felt like I was running around collecting marbles that somebody scattered on a tile floor just to pay the rent. So, and it ended up being kind of a cage at times for me. So, with that freedom was this great anxiety of how am I going to pay my bills? So I have a lot less time now, right? Because we're working the 9 to 5, but I have that relaxation. So I guess in the future is focusing on a balance and getting back into the arts.
Yeah, I think it's always a balance, honestly. And anytime I've wanted more stability, and I have a little bit of it now, I know personally now I'm kind of like itching to make more work. But I feel like I feel like it's something that's actually not talked about enough, especially just around contemporary performers in burlesque, because I feel like for most of us, we're all constantly trying to find some kind of balance, pay the bills, and also feel fulfilled artistically. I know for me, like I never achieve all three of those things at any given time. It's usually like two or one or some amalgamation.
Yeah, definitely. It's like instead of a seesaw as an analogy for life, it's more of a Bosu ball, those half spheres where you kind of have to balance in all directions but stay in the middle.
Yes. Oh my God. Your metaphors are so great. It's like being on a Bosu ball and someone's just spilled marbles all around you. And and you have to collect the marbles while being on the Bosu ball.
While lip syncing.
While lip syncing for your life. Well, so I know that you might be taking a pause right now, but two questions. What do you want to see more of on stage in general, burlesque and otherwise? And what can we expect next for the next time that you do come back on stage?
Ooh, good questions. I would love to see more creativity on stage. And I say that meaning not that I'm not seeing it now, but I think that's what I enjoy most. I just love seeing what makes an individual themselves and what makes them unique. And I
Hmm.
want to celebrate that. So I would like to see more unique stuff. In terms of my personal trajectory, I still feel like I'm kind of recovering from this gig treadmill that I had put myself on as a
Sure.
performer. It's when it stopped feeling really good and it was just sort of habitual doing many shows. And I think I need to kind of cocoon for a little while, weed the garden, the actual garden, like weed, do pedestrian things before I come back to this magical glittery world. And once I do, I would love to see how that looks different for me.
Hmm.
What's next? Is it playing with lighting and projections, or is it sound design? Is it, how am I different? We're all very different. A lot has happened in the last 3 years. A lot. And so I'm sure as artists, we have different things to say, we have different stories to tell, and we'll have different ways of going about doing that. So I don't really have answers for you. I have more questions, but I am excited for when that day comes to explore.
Well, I'm excited for it too because I love watching you on stage. And I think it's also great to put out there, something, I don't know if this is true or not, but a quality that I think you emanate is patience. I don't know if you think of yourself as a patient person. I am not a patient person. And like that you can just kind of give yourself this cocoon time and this kind of grace to rest and think about what you want to do next. Again, I think is just like it says so much about you as an artist and a person, and I just really admire that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that patience comes with, ooh, how do I phrase this? I feel like that patience that I have learned to have for myself and those around me comes from a sense of anxiety that I also experience, right? It's like the double-edged sword of, okay, I'm feeling super anxious about this one specific thing. What can I do about it? Well, I need to relax, right? I need to relax around that. So I've learned patience, and thank you for seeing that. I feel like I could be more patient, especially when it comes to certain things.
What things?
Ooh, you know, I don't know. I don't like to wait for things in the mail. I want them here instantly. Uh, but when it comes time to like the fitness journey, I am sort of back on this journey to kind of get back into a shape that I felt like was really great for me,
Mhm.
and I'm excited to get there. But it's a process, right? Not that I'm super different than I once was, but it's noticeable for me, and I would love to kind of shift that. And patience with other people, and sometimes maybe I have made a personal choice or made a personal realization about something that I would like to be different in the world, and
Mhm.
then wait for the world to catch up, right? Things
Sure.
like that.
Sure.
So that's where the patience is harder.
Okay. That all makes sense. That all makes sense. Luminous Pariah, where can people find you?
Ooh, they can find me and Mod Carousel mostly on Instagram these days. I feel like that's the most current place. So at Mod Carousel or at Luminous Pariah.
Excellent. I will make sure I tag those in the show notes. Thank you so much for making time to talk with me and be on this podcast. I say this to every person that I interview because it's just true. I think so highly of you for what that's worth. And both on stage and off stage, I think you're just such a unique voice in burlesque. And, uh, and, and you do it with such grace and creativity. And I just love that about you. And then also you're just a truly kind person backstage, and
Mm,
that combination is rare. And anyway, I just
thank
wanted you
you.
to know that.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. This has been a really lovely conversation.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you for listening to another edition of Showboys. Make sure you tune in next week. And until then, bye. You want to say bye?
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Showboys. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you didn't like it,
You are a whore, darling.